So, what happens to our digital lives? All those photos, emails, documents, social media accounts after we're gone. It's not just about physical possessions anymore, is it?
Not at all. It's a massive, often overlooked part of someone's legacy now.
Yeah, we looked at some sources on this, and one story really stood out. A widow in the UK, Hayley Smith, she spent 2 years just struggling to get into her deceased husband Matthew's online accounts.
2 years, wow.
Yeah, she desperately needed vital documents from his email, ended up having to guess passwords, and dealing with his social media, especially Facebook memorialization, was apparently this incredibly drawn-out, stressful thing.
That's heartbreaking. And sadly, not uncommon.
She told the sources it never crossed her mind before he died that this would be such a huge problem, it just wasn't something they'd thought about.
And that story really highlights the core challenge, doesn't it? So much of our personal history, our memories, even essential information
Hmm.
is now stored online, locked away.
Locked behind passwords, yeah, and privacy policies that just weren't really designed for, well, for death.
Exactly. Navigating all that just adds this immense layer of stress on top of grief.
So our mission in this deep dive is to really pull apart the sources you've shared with us on this topic. We want to extract the most important bits of information about how the big tech companies like Google and Apple are creating tools for this,
Right. What tools are actually available?
and what the legal landscape looks like, and crucially, what practical steps you, our listener, can take right now to avoid leaving that kind of, well, digital chaos for your loved ones.
Yeah, we'll be digging into the nuggets of knowledge from research on company policies, user experiences like Haley Smith's, and the legal frameworks that apply here.
Okay, let's start by getting clear on the landscape. What exactly are we talking about when we say digital legacy?
Well, think of it as pretty much everything you own, create, or have accounts for online.
Okay.
So your emails in Gmail, photos and videos in iCloud or Google Photos, documents saved in cloud storage like Google Drive or Dropbox.
Social media profiles.
Yep, those two. Online banking accounts, maybe even cryptocurrency wallets, or valuable domain names if you have them. It's a lot.
Right, and unlike, say, a physical photo album or a box of important papers you can just hand over, these digital things are protected, aren't they? By passwords, terms of service?
Precisely. And those terms of service often weren't written with inheritance or post-death access in mind. They were written for the living user.
And that's where digital legacy planning comes in then.
Exactly. It's about taking steps now while you can, using the tools available or making legal arrangements to decide what happens to those accounts and files after you're gone. Taking control.
Why bother, though? I mean, it sounds like another thing to add to the list. The sources made a strong case for the benefits.
Oh, the benefits are huge. The biggest one, and the one that really hits home from that Haley Smith story, is sparing your loved ones just immense stress and difficulty during an already incredibly painful time.
Right, making things slightly easier.
Exactly. Planning can dramatically cut down the time and potentially the cost of trying to get access to necessary information or close accounts through complex legal routes.
And it can help protect against things like identity theft, too, I suppose, if accounts are just left dormant.
That's another good point, yes. Protects against data loss or misuse. Long story short, it makes a very difficult time just that little bit more manageable for the people left behind.
And we're focusing today particularly on Google and Apple because, let's face it, for a huge number of people, that's where so much of this digital life actually resides, right? Email, photos, documents.
Absolutely. They are the giants of personal cloud storage and digital services for many, many people.
Okay, so let's dive into Google first. They've had something in place for a while now, haven't they? The Inactive Account Manager.
Yes, Google was actually one of the first major platforms to tackle this head-on with a specific tool. The Inactive Account Manager, or IAM, lets you set up a plan for what happens to your Google account if it becomes inactive for a set period.
Inactive meaning you haven't logged in for a while.
Right. You define that period, say, after 6 months or 12 months of no activity, which might indicate you've passed away or become incapacitated. It covers your Gmail, Drive, Photos, YouTube, basically your whole Google ecosystem.
And what are the options? What can you actually do with the account?
You get two main choices. One, you can arrange for Google to share specific data from your account with people you designate your trusted contacts.
Oh.
Or two, you can choose to have the entire account and all its contents deleted after that period of inactivity.
So you can pick who gets access. That sounds key.
It is. You can designate up to 10 trusted contacts. This is you giving Google explicit instructions in advance about who you trust to handle your digital information after you're gone.
And you said specific data. You don't have to give them everything.
That's right. That's a really important feature. During the setup, you can actually choose which Google services you want data shared, or maybe just photos, or maybe Drive and Gmail. And you can even customize this per contact.
Oh, wow. So, like, my spouse could get access to emails and documents, but maybe a sibling just gets the photos.
Exactly that kind of scenario. You tailor the access. And you can also write a personal message that Google will send to your contacts, along with the notification that they can access the data.
That flexibility seems really powerful. How does someone actually, set this up? The sources gave a bit of an overview.
Yeah, it's usually in your Google account settings. You'd log in, go to your account management page, and look under something like Data and Privacy. The specific name might change slightly, but look for Inactive Account Manager or Make a Plan for Your Digital Legacy.
Okay, find the setting. And the first step is choosing that inactivity timeout period.
Correct. You pick how long Google should wait before considering the account inactive. The options are 3, 6, 12, or 18 months. And Google is pretty good about this. They'll send you reminder emails before that period is up, just checking in case you're still around, but just haven't logged into that specific account.
Right, so you don't accidentally trigger it.
Right.
Then you add the trusted contacts.
Yes. You provide their email addresses and, crucially, their phone numbers. Google uses the phone number later for verification when a contact actually tries to access the data. This is also where you select which services each person gets access to and write that optional personal message.
Okay. And then the final choice is whether to have the account deleted after sharing happens.
Exactly. That's an optional step. You can choose that after your trusted contacts have been notified and had a chance to download the data you designated, Google will then permanently delete the account and all its content. Or you can choose just sharing without deletion, or just deletion without sharing.
What's the really key takeaway here? Why use this tool versus just doing nothing?
Well, without this plan, Google's policy is that accounts inactive for 2 years can be deleted anyway. But if your family needs access to data before that, or wants to preserve something specific, they have to make a special request to Google.
Which sounds difficult.
It can be. Google reviews these requests very carefully for privacy reasons. And here's the critical point. Google will not just hand over your password. Never. So trying to retrieve specific data like photos or emails becomes this incredibly difficult, often frustrating process for your family. It can involve legal steps, significant delays. It's often described as an uphill battle.
So setting up the inactive account manager basically gives Google your permission in advance.
Precisely. It provides a secure, pre-approved pathway that bypasses all that uncertainty and potential difficulty. It respects your privacy while alive, but provides for your wishes after death.
Okay, that makes sense for Google control via inactivity triggers and trusted contacts. Now, Apple has a different system, right? Their digital legacy program.
Yes, Apple's approach is different. They introduced their program a bit later, I think it was late 2021, with iOS 15.2 and related updates. Their system revolves around the concept of a legacy contact and a unique access key.
Okay, so similar to Google in that you designate someone specific.
Yes, you choose one or more people to be your legacy contacts. But the mechanism is the key difference. When you add someone, Apple generates a unique access key. It's a long alphanumeric code, often with a QR code too.
An access key, what does the contact do with that?
After you pass away, your designated legacy contact needs 2 things: that access key and a copy of your death certificate. They submit these to Apple to request access.
And if Apple approves it, how do they get the data? Do they just log into my old account?
No, and this is important for security. Apple doesn't give them your password or access to your live account. Instead, they grant access via a new temporary Apple ID that specially links to your data. Your original Apple ID is then deactivated.
Ah, okay, so it's a separate controlled access point.
Exactly. And it also allows them to remove activation lock from any Apple devices linked to your account, so the devices themselves can potentially be reset and used by your family. Apple also notifies you when someone is added or removed as a legacy contact, so you're kept in the loop.
What kind of data can the legacy contact access through this special account?
Most of the data you store in iCloud, so things like your photos, videos, messages, backups, notes, files you saved in iCloud Drive, contacts, calendars, and even device backups. It's quite comprehensive for iCloud content, but it's also really important to note what's not included based on the sources.
Okay, what's off limits?
Things like purchased media music, movies, Books bought from the iTunes or App Stores, those are typically licensed just to you, the original account holder, and aren't transferable.
Right, licensing restrictions.
And maybe even more critically, passwords stored in your iCloud keychain remain encrypted and are not accessible to the legacy contact. Apple keeps that secure.
Okay, so they get the memories, the documents, the personal stuff, but not the keys to other kingdoms, so to speak, like sensitive password data.
That's a good way to put it. It balances access to personal legacy data with security for other credentials.
Is there a time limit on how long they have access?
Yes, there is. Once Apple approves the legacy contacts request and sets up that special access account, the contact has 3 years to access and download the data. After that 3-year period, Apple permanently deletes the data associated with that legacy account.
3 years seems like a decent amount of time.
It does. The sources noted it's quite a generous window, giving people ample time during a difficult period.
How do you actually set up a legacy contact? Where do you find this in the settings?
You'll find it within your Apple ID settings on your devices. So on an iPhone or iPad, you go into the Settings app, tap your name right at the top. On a Mac, it's in System Settings or System Preferences on older Mac OS again. Click on your name or Apple ID.
Okay, got it. Inside Apple ID settings, then where?
You need to look for the section related to sign-in security or possibly password and security. Within that area, you should see the option listed as Legacy Contact.
And once I find that and choose someone, how do they get that all-important access key? That sounds like the crucial piece.
It absolutely is. Apple gives you a couple ways to share it securely. You can send it directly via iMessage to your chosen contact, assuming they also have a compatible Apple device. If they do, it can even automatically save the key right into their own Apple ID settings for safekeeping.
Oh, that's handy. What if they don't use iMessage or an iPhone?
Then you have the option to print the access key out or save it as a PDF file. This generates a document that includes the key itself and the instructions for how to use it later.
And if you print it or save it as a PDF, where should you keep that? It sounds really important not to lose.
Extremely important. The strong recommendation from the sources and estate experts is to treat that access key like any other critical estate planning document. Store a copy with your will, perhaps give a copy to your attorney, keep one in a secure home safe.
So safeguard that key is the message.
Definitely. Your contact will need both that key and the death certificate to make the request to Apple. So number 1, tell the people you've named that you've designated them. Number 2, make sure they know how to find or access that key when the time comes. Maybe even keep a secure backup of the key yourself, separate from the copy you give them, just in case.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what happens if you don't set up a legacy contact with Apple? What's the default situation?
This is where Apple's approach gets quite strict, largely due to their very strong stance on user privacy as a fundamental right. Without a designated legacy contact using this official process, getting access to the content of a deceased person's iCloud account is generally very difficult.
More difficult than with Google?
Generally, yes, for accessing the content.
Yeah.
Apple typically requires a court order or very specific legal documentation to release that data. Just providing a death certificate usually isn't enough for them to hand over photos, emails, notes, etc.
So unlike Google, where the default might eventually be deletion, Apple's default without planning is basically a potential legal roadblock to getting the actual data back.
That's a good summary. Because Apple views privacy so seriously, they are extremely cautious about releasing personal data without either the user's explicit prior consent via the legacy contact tool or a formal legal directive. In the US, for example, this often means the executor or family needs to go to court to get an order specifically authorizing Apple to grant access to those digital assets.
And that sounds like it could take time and money.
Exactly. The laws vary internationally, of course, but the general principle holds. Without a planned legacy contact, accessing the contents usually involves a formal legal process. It can be lengthy, costly, and add significant frustration. Apple might be more willing to help delete an account if provided with proof of death, but getting the data is a hurdle.
So it sounds like both Google and Apple are really pushing users towards using these specific tools they've built precisely to avoid these kinds of delays and difficulties for families.
They absolutely are. They highlight these tools as the recommended, smoothest path forward for users and their loved ones.
We've gone through the mechanics of the tools, but let's circle back to why this is so much more than just ticking boxes and settings. It's about the human impact, isn't it?
Absolutely. Just think back to that story of Haley Smith again. 2 years. 2 years of what she called digital chaos, just trying to access basic information and manage her late husband's online presence. That struggle wasn't just some administrative task. It was real, added pain and stress during the worst time imaginable.
Yeah. It really highlights the significant burden that can be left behind when these digital affairs aren't put in order.
Now contrast that with the kind of scenario these tools are designed to enable.
Right, the positive alternative.
Imagine someone called John. Let's say he took the time to set up Google's inactive account manager, designating his daughter, and also set up his wife as his Apple legacy contact. When John passes away, maybe a few months later, his daughter automatically receives that notification from Google. She follows the link, verifies her identity, and can easily download the photos and documents John wanted her to have. No lawyers, no court, no guessing passwords.
Smooth.
And his wife, remembering John told her about the Apple legacy contact and where you put the access key, finds it. She provides it along with the death certificate to Apple. Relatively quickly, she gets access to that special legacy account, finds cherished voicemails, important notes, maybe recent photos stored in iCloud. Again, no massive legal hurdles.
So one path leads to that digital chaos and prolonged struggle. The other leads to immediate, or at least much faster, meaningful access to memories and important files. Respectfully done.
That's the core difference planning makes. It's about providing that secure, pre-approved channel for the people you choose. It lets them access what you've decided they should have, balancing the company's need for security and privacy with your family's legitimate need for access after you're gone.
It's like these tools give your loved ones the permission slip the companies need to cooperate, right?
Yeah.
Bypassing those complex legal hoops that often existed before these features became common.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It provides the authorization.
Now, a practical tip came up in the sources that feels incredibly important, maybe easily overlooked. Actually talking to your chosen contacts.
Yes, it might feel a bit awkward, morbid even, to bring it up. But letting your Google trusted contacts know they might eventually receive an email from Google about your account. Or telling your Apple legacy contact, hey, I've named you, and here's how you'll get the access key. That's a crucial step.
Why so crucial?
It just prevents so much confusion and potential panic later on. Imagine getting an official-looking email from Google about a deceased loved one's account, out of the blue. You might think it's a scam or not know what to do. Knowing in advance prepares them. People who've been through this say knowing beforehand made a huge difference. It really is like a final act of kindness.
Okay, but what about the simple route? Just, writing down all your passwords and giving the list to someone you trust. Isn't that easier than setting all this up?
Ah, the password list. It's a very common thought, and maybe seems like the path of least resistance. And practically speaking, yes, having the password might allow someone to log in and access accounts. Leaving a secure list of key accounts and logins, maybe with your executor, or in a safe deposit box, or with your lawyer, could be helpful as a fallback.
But I sense a but coming.
Yes, there's a big but, and it was flagged quite clearly in the sources. Simply sharing your passwords and having someone log into your accounts after you've died can actually violate the terms of service of many, many platforms.
So even if they have the password, logging in might not be strictly legal or allowed?
Correct. Legal experts, like those cited from the American Bar Association, point out that an executor isn't automatically authorized to just log in using the deceased's credentials if the platform's terms of service prohibit account transfer or sharing. Those terms are a contract you agreed to.
So the password list might work practically, but it puts your loved ones in a legally gray area.
Exactly. It's legally ambiguous, and in some interpretations, could even potentially run afoul of laws related to unauthorized computer access, depending on the jurisdiction and the specifics. Using the official tools provided by Google and Apple, or granting explicit legal authority through your will, is the much cleaner, more reliable, and legally sound approach.
And that brings us squarely into the legal side of things. This isn't just tech settings, is it? It's deeply connected to your overall estate plan.
Absolutely. Your digital assets, your photos, emails, files, accounts, and how you want them handled after your death need to be considered and included as part of your will and broader estate planning.
How should someone actually approach that in their will? What needs to be in there?
Well, you should definitely include provisions that acknowledge your digital assets. You might not list every single account, but certainly the important ones. State your general wishes regarding access, management, or deletion.
And crucial.
Crucially, you need to grant your executor, the person legally responsible for handling your estate, the authority to manage these digital assets. And this might include granting explicit consent for them to access things like your email accounts or cloud storage. Privacy laws, especially around communications content, often require this explicit consent.
Right, you need to give them permission legally. And what about the password issue in the will itself?
Ah, yes, the absolute critical warning here. Do not list your actual passwords or access keys directly in your will.
Why not?
Because wills typically become public documents when they go through the probate process after death. You absolutely do not want your passwords becoming part of the public record.
Okay, that makes sense. So what's the alternative?
Instead, your will can reference a separate, securely stored document or location where that access information is kept. This might be a note mentioning you use a specific password manager, or referencing a sealed letter held by your attorney, or an encrypted file that your executor has the key to. Keep the sensitive data out of the public document.
You mentioned an executor, but also a digital executor. What's that?
It's a concept that's gaining traction. It's basically someone you specifically name, either in your will or another document, to take charge of managing your digital assets.
Can it be the same person as your main executor?
It certainly can be, but maybe your main executor is, say, an older relative who isn't very tech-savvy. In that case, you could designate a separate digital executor, maybe a younger, more tech-comfortable niece or nephew, to handle just the online accounts, social media, digital files, etc. Naming them clarifies the role and gives your primary executor the ability to officially delegate those specific tasks.
And is there specific legislation that helps clarify all this, at least in the U.S.?
Yes, thankfully. Most U.S. states have now adopted a version of the revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act, usually called RUFODO for short.
RUFODO. Okay, what does that do?
It provides a much-needed legal framework for accessing digital assets after death. And really importantly, it establishes a clear pecking order, a hierarchy, for how access decisions are made.
A pecking order. Okay, tell us about that. What gets top priority?
Under RUFODO, the absolute highest priority goes to instructions you've given using the online service's own tool.
So Google's Inactive Account Manager or Apple's Legacy Contact feature.
Exactly. If you've used the tool provided by the platform itself to designate someone or set instructions, your choice made through that tool overrides everything else. It's legally considered your most direct and specific instruction for that particular account.
Wow. Okay, so using those built-in tools is actually legally powerful.
Very much so. RUFODO gives them top legal weight for that specific service.
What's the next level down in the pecking order?
If you haven't used the online tool for a specific account, then the instructions in your will or other formal estate planning documents come next. If your will grants your executor the authority and necessary consent to access your digital assets, those instructions should be honored by the company.
Okay, so tool first, then will. What if you haven't done either? No tool used, nothing specific in the will.
If there are absolutely no instructions from you, neither through an online tool nor in your estate plan, then the company's terms of service, TOS, apply by default.
And what do those usually say?
Well, as we discussed, many 2S state that accounts are personal, non-transferable, and might terminate upon death. This is the scenario where your executor could have no legal right to access the content of the account. They might only be able to request account deletion, or they might need to go back to getting that court order we talked about.
So RUFODO essentially reinforces how critical it is to either use the tools or have clear instructions in your will. Otherwise, you default to the company rules, which might mean no access.
Precisely. It clarifies that you need to provide that authorization, especially for accessing sensitive communication content like emails, which RUFODO treats with extra privacy protection. Without your consent via a tool or will, access is likely barred. It gives your planning legal teeth.
Okay, that covers Google, Apple, and the main legal framework in the U.S. What about other online accounts, like social media?
Yeah, policies there vary quite a bit. Facebook, for instance, has options for memorializing an account, and you can designate a legacy contact who has limited abilities, like pinning a post or changing the profile picture, but generally can't read messages.
And others?
Twitter or X and Instagram generally offer account deactivation or removal upon request with proof of death, but typically don't provide access to content or allow for legacy management in the same way. For any service that holds data important to you or your family banking, shopping sites, other clouds, you really need to check their specific policies. Many smaller services might only offer deletion.
What about digital assets that have actual monetary value? Things like cryptocurrency, maybe online investments.
This is a really critical area and often more complex.
Yeah.
Cryptocurrencies, stocks held in online brokerage accounts, valuable domain names, maybe even NFTs if you have them.
No.
These aren't just memories. They have tangible financial value.
And losing access means losing the money.
Potentially, yes, especially with crypto. If the private keys or login credentials are lost, the assets can be gone forever. And most of these platforms don't have nice built-in legacy features like Google or Apple.
So what's the advice there?
For these, you absolutely must include clear instructions in your will, stating who inherits these specific assets. Your executor needs not only the clear legal permission to take control, but also the practical technical means to access them. That might mean securely passing on login credentials, hardware wallet PNs, recovery seed phrases, two-factor authentication methods.
That sounds like something where you definitely want professional advice.
Absolutely. Consulting with an estate planning attorney who understands digital assets is highly recommended, particularly for anything with significant monetary value or involving complex access like crypto wallets. They can help ensure the transfer is handled correctly both legally and practically.
We've covered the tech tools and the legal rules, but there's also a very personal, almost ethical dimension to this, isn't there? Planning isn't just about can someone get access, but should they? What do you want preserved?
That's a really insightful point. Just because you can use Google's tool to share every single email you ever sent doesn't mean you necessarily want to or that your loved ones need or want that.
Right.
Part of planning is thinking thoughtfully about what aspects of your digital life truly hold meaningful memories or information for your loved ones versus what might be just digital clutter or perhaps private correspondence you'd actually prefer be deleted after you're gone.
And the tools allow for that choice.
Google's tool, for example, explicitly allows you to choose both sharing and deletion. You can share specific things with specific people and then direct Google to delete the rest or the whole account eventually. Apple's focus is on access with deletion after 3 years. Making conscious choices about this is part of the process.
Any tips on how to convey those more nuanced wishes?
Sometimes, a separate informal letter of instruction can be helpful. This isn't usually a legally binding part of the will, but rather a personal letter to your executor or family outlining your wishes in plain language. Things like, please archive all the family photos from Google Photos, or shut down my Facebook profile, don't memorialize it, or delete my work emails. It can guide them in making decisions and help prevent confusion or even conflict later.
And we should remember that laws around digital inheritance aren't the same everywhere, right?
Yes, absolutely. While the general concepts are becoming more common globally, the specific legal frameworks can differ significantly. The EU has strong data privacy regulations, like GDPR, that influence how companies handle this. Germany, for example, has had court rulings suggesting digital content can be inherited much like physical belongings, like diaries.
So if you have assets or family internationally,
It's important to be aware that laws in different jurisdictions might apply, and getting advice relevant to those locations might be necessary. It adds another layer of complexity.
finally, and this seems critical for any planning, this isn't a set it and forget it kind of thing, is it?
Definitely not. That's a crucial point the sources emphasize. You need to treat your digital legacy plan just like any other part of your estate planning. It needs regular review and updates.
Why?
Well, think about it. You open new online accounts all the time. You close old ones. Companies change their policies, they update their tools, they introduce new features. Major life events happen, marriage, divorce, births, deaths in the family, which might change who you want to designate.
So how often should you review?
Make it a practice to revisit your plan periodically, maybe every few years, or whenever you update your will or experience a major life change. Just check that your designated contacts are still appropriate, that the access methods are current, and that the plan still reflects your wishes and your current digital footprint.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up. What are the main things you want people to take away?
I think the biggest thing is that planning for your online afterlife is now just as essential as planning for your physical one. It's not an optional extra anymore. And the good news is, major companies like Google and Apple have developed powerful tools that give you significant control.
And the flip side is that choosing not to plan, doing nothing, can leave that really heavy burden, that digital chaos and those legal hurdles squarely on your loved one's shoulders.
Exactly. Taking these proactive steps using these tools is a way to significantly lighten their load during what's already an incredibly difficult time. It really is a final gift you can give them, a gift of clarity and peace of mind.
Knowing your digital affairs are in order, that your memories and important information are accessible to the people you trust. That provides comfort, doesn't it? Both for you now and for your family later.
Immense comfort, I think.
So, just to recap some practical steps listeners can take right now. If you use Google, find that inactive account manager in your settings and set it up. Choose your timeout, designate your trusted contacts, decide on sharing or deletion.
If you're in the Apple ecosystem, go into your Apple ID settings and set up one or more legacy contacts, and make absolutely sure that crucial access key is shared securely and your contact knows where to find it.
Then, think about your other important digital assets, especially anything with financial value like crypto or investments, and make a list. Ensure these are specifically addressed in your will, granting authority and access methods.
And finally, take that step, even if it feels a bit awkward. Talk to the people you've chosen. Let them know you've designated them and what they might need to do eventually. Communication is key.
The contrast really is stark, isn't it? Between the potential struggle and frustration of doing nothing and the relative ease and clarity these tools can offer when used properly.
It's night and day, potentially.
Agreed. Now, before we finish, the necessary but very important disclaimer. This discussion has been an overview based on the source material we reviewed. It is not legal advice.
Absolutely not.
State laws, digital asset regulations, company policies, they are complex, they change, and they vary significantly depending on where you live. Always, always consult a qualified estate planning attorney in your jurisdiction.
Yes. Get personalized advice tailored to your specific situation. They can help you draft your will or trust correctly, ensure your digital legacy plan aligns with local laws, and keep everything updated. Professional legal guidance is really key here.
Couldn't agree more. Taking these steps today, using the tools, talking to your lawyer, talking to your family, it can genuinely save your loved ones enormous stress, cost, and uncertainty down the road. It's an act of love, really, preserving your memories, your stories, and making sure your family can access them.
It really is. And perhaps, as we navigate this increasingly digital age, planning for our digital end forces us to consider something deeper. What aspects of our online presence, our digital selves, truly hold meaning? What really matters enough to be preserved for those we leave behind? And perhaps, which parts are we actually comfortable or even desirous of letting go?
That's a powerful question to leave with. Thinking about the digital stories and memories your loved ones might cherish most, is there something you can do today to make absolutely sure they can access that specific piece of your legacy?
Something to ponder.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.